Hi, everyone. Welcome to True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with parted blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a green flannel shirt on, with a black headset around my head. I'm seated in front of a purple wall and some bookcases. This is my home office. Like roughly 25% of Americans and a full 17% of Philadelphians, I'm disabled. And whether we look locally, nationally, or globally, disabled communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen. As many of you know, I was born disabled. I've never known differently, and I probably always will be. So I'm naturally curious, right? When I meet other disabled people, what their stories are like. And I'm lucky that I have so many folks to chat with about these topics. Uh, my guest for tonight is my friend Nakia, and I can't wait to hear what she has to share. I'm really looking forward to her story. Hi, Nakia. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Nakia, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was this a surprise, or was it something you maybe like were actively pursuing? Tell us that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my path to diagnosis is still kind of happening currently. So, I've been in the process of seeing psychiatric nurse practitioners and PAs within the past 2.5 years. So, a little background, I was undiagnosed with depression and anxiety for most of my 20s. I'm 30 years old now. And about 5 or 6 years ago, my sister, Anisha, who is a PhD student in clinical psych, recommended that I see a therapist. And I was kind of in a tough spot in my life with my living situation and my job. And I had been feeling, you know, a certain way for quite a long time and dealing with certain like depression symptoms, losing interest in activities, having low motivation, and not really being able to function the way that I wanted to. And so I started individual therapy. And we also talked a lot about what I was dealing with emotionally. I dealt with disordered eating during that time, and I didn't understand that it was a coping mechanism for what I didn't understand at the time. And in therapy, we started to talk about the possibility that I have depression. And so I went to my primary care physician at the time, and they started prescribing me medications like a low dose of like an antidepressant. I was on that for probably over a year. Didn't really help much. And then December of 2021, my dad passed away suddenly, which was very tragic. It was very difficult for me and my family, still is very difficult. And I went from kind of masking every day, being able to get through, um, putting a smile on my face, to not being able to eat or sleep. I felt very physically sick with grief, and my depression symptoms worsened. And I voluntarily admitted myself to my local hospital for suicidal ideation. And they referred me to a psychiatric nurse practitioner who I saw for like 6 to 8 months. Um, my therapist at the time recommended me to see someone else. I had lost one of my jobs, and I never heard from my previous provider again after they said, basically, let me know when you figure the insurance out. Never heard from them again. So I started seeing a different nurse practitioner, and we had talked about depression, anxiety, PTSD from the death of my dad, and basically kind of got to the point. I'd seen him over a year. I've taken over 10 different medications without really understanding my exact diagnosis. So when I was in the hospital, the psychiatrist diagnosed me with major depressive disorder, which I understand based on how I was presenting at the time. But then when I expressed to my previous psychiatric nurse practitioner that I wanted to talk more about my diagnoses and I thought there was something missing, kind of didn't really dismiss me, but kind of referred me to like another clinic, which is outside of where my primary can refer me to. So I wasn't able to go there. So I ended up going to another practice that my therapist, my current therapist, I've had 3 therapists, 3 psychiatric providers in the last like 2.5 years. Well, therapists in the last 5 years. Let me correct that. But psychiatric providers, I've had 3 in the last 2.5 years. And she recommended me to this practice. I saw this PA for a couple of months, and I was having a depressive episode one day. I had called out of work, which is one of the symptoms that I get the most when I'm feeling really depressed is I miss work. I don't keep up on my hygiene, typical, depression symptoms. And I expressed to him my need for further assessment and kind of dismissed it. Basically said, well, that's what we do with the self-report measures. Asked me some more questions. Um, he expressed his concern about me saying, that I hadn't showered in a week and that I had missed work. And I said, well, that's pretty common for me when I'm feeling really depressed. It's been this cycle. It's been going on for the past couple of years. And he basically told me to go to the hospital. So I called my local psychiatric hospital a few days later, and they denied me inpatient care because I wasn't suicidal. You may want to put a trigger warning on this. I don't want to trigger anyone. So um, I told him I'm not feeling suicidal. I'm just feeling really depressed, and I don't really know where to turn. So I went a little while without a provider. Started calling different places, and I was all prepared to go to the hospital and then ended up not going to the hospital. And I'm seeing a new provider now. I think he's actually a student, like a nurse practitioner student who's working under a licensed um, nurse practitioner, but the practice is really welcoming and everything. But basically, I'm kind of back to like step one because he reviewed the notes from my previous provider who had seen for over a year. And he did labs, and basically, we're at mood disorder unspecified, which is very unhelpful to me because it doesn't give me much of a guideline. And he's like, well, you don't really fit into major depressive disorder. You don't fully fit into bipolar 2 or bipolar 1. Because, not to give too much information, but antidepressants do not help me. They make me more agitated, irritable, and I just don't respond well to them. I respond better to mood stabilizers, which is why we were kind of thinking maybe bipolar 2. So, of course, anxiety is still there, the PTSD is still there, but um, that's my path to diagnosis. It's a little murky because it is a mood disorder unspecified is a diagnosis, but it doesn't really give me much to go off of. And at one point, my previous provider, I had mentioned ADHD. And so he put me on an ADHD medication, but I was never assessed for that. So I get really frustrated because some of these providers will just say, oh, kind of sounds like you're dealing with XYZ. Let's just put you on this medication and try it out without actually taking the time to focus on a diagnosis. So I do have a diagnosis. It's not the most helpful, but like that's where I'm at right now. And I feel like the more that I see this provider, the more we'll learn about my, diagnosis and kind of, build off of it. Um, the provider I'm seeing is very nice. The practice is very welcoming. Um, it's just even saying that I have a disability is is kind of hard for me because I'm an able-bodied person and I grew up as such, and I have a sister who has a disability and a chronic illness, and she has been disabled since she was born. And I, recently within the last couple of years had to acknowledge the fact that I need, specific services like psychiatric medication and psychiatric services and therapy. I see my therapist weekly. I do grief counseling in addition to that, also. So this has kind of been a newer journey for me. something that I've been dealing with for a long time, but the actual path to diagnosis and figuring everything out has been more recent.
I really appreciate how forthcoming you're being. And I also respect that you thought ahead, right? And advising to put maybe a trigger warning on our video. It was a thought that I was having as well. So I see you in that. Nakia, I really appreciate that answer. I'm so sorry that these providers have just kind of like helped you out and then seemingly at random drop you. No one deserves that, not you or anyone. So that's not wonderful to hear. But at least you're in a good spot now. It sounds like the nurse practitioner you're seeing currently is somebody who, well, cares for you a lot, as you say, or is welcoming, to use your words. I want to give you a bit more space to talk about what impact that your diagnostic journey has had on your life. You talk a little bit about um, missing work. You talk about uh, how your depression takes physical form in its symptoms. But you could also consider what it does to you, like academically, if you're in school or socially. Uh, just giving you a wider picture or a wider canvas to paint upon, if you will.
Yeah, so I would say it depends on my mood. Um, my diagnosis is very like mood specific. Um, so there are times where I feel a little bit more like myself and I will go out and do things. I'll spend time with friends. I will, sorry, my roommate's cat is trying to climb over the laptop. Um, I'll go to powwows and dance and do cultural activities and whatnot. But my day to day activity is really difficult. So most days, I would say 90% of the time, it's really difficult to get up in the morning and go to work. Um, just because I'm there does not mean that it was easy for me to get up and go. It's it's basically, I have to, and I went a while with missing work and struggling financially to the point where I didn't know if I was going to be able to afford my rent, um, because I was having trouble getting to work. So my symptoms went from feeling, down and helpless and depressed, but functioning, to not functioning enough to be able to make a living. And that's really where my focus is right now, is just trying to have some stability. Like, I have a really good job. I work for SUNY. So I'm in a really good spot with my job. It's just a matter of trying to be more stable when it comes to, my daily routine. And, I struggle with doing chores and hygiene. And socially, I would say right now I'm in a pretty good spot. I just had a really big powwow weekend. Memorial Day weekend, I was head lady dancer at Odenong Powwow in Amherst, Massachusetts. So that was really fun. And I really enjoyed that. And I have plans for the summer. I've taken some days off, so long weekends, so that I can dance at powwows. Um, there's been some like physical issues, like with my foot. I have plantar fasciitis, and so there's like some other things at play that have been making things difficult. Um, but one thing that I used to do is I used to isolate whenever I was feeling really depressed. So I try to push myself not to do that. It's something I talk about with my therapist, like how to, manage, that symptom. But I would say my diagnosis affects every aspect of my life, whether it's financial, social, you know, my symptoms make it really difficult for me to function daily. Um, and it's not something that can be seen physically. So if you were to just meet me, on the street somewhere, like you would have no idea that it takes so much energy for me to be able to get up in the morning and do the things that I need to do, and that there are days where I just cannot do it. And I have missed some work, but I have been very transparent with my boss, and he understands. Um, so he is working with me. But it is very difficult, especially growing up, not really having these issues. I would say they started when I was probably 17 or 18 years old, is when I started feeling depressed. The anxiety was probably a little earlier than that. Um, but it's just been really difficult, like these past like 10 years or so, um, trying to manage everything. And I also never was treated for an eating disorder, but after talking with my first therapist, it's very evident that I had one, and I worked through it myself, mainly with like exercise and like fitness. Um, so that's what I would say. I would say it impacts every aspect of my life, and I'm working on stability. Like today, I got up, didn't want to go to work, but I went, and I got some food on my way home, and I was looking forward to doing, this interview. So that was really great. So yeah, I would say that's pretty much my answer for that.
No, that's a great answer. I really respect the full picture that you gave, how daily tasks are tough for you, even if you want to do them sometimes. And I'm really glad that you have this understanding place of employment, which contrasts kind of not in a great way with the support you've gotten or not gotten from your mental health providers, right? In some situations. So I really uh, am grateful that you took time to do this. Nakia, one thing that you mentioned in your first and second answers is the length of time you've been searching for that correct diagnosis, the things that you've tried that haven't worked for you, the confusion that you felt. Looking back, what advice would you give perhaps a younger version of yourself if you had to do this all over again?
Yeah, I would say specifically to individuals who are struggling with mental health conditions, and this very well could apply to other situations as well. But I would say, talk about it. Whether it's a trusted friend or a therapist. For me, therapy has been really helpful. I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now, and whenever whenever one of my therapists tried to push back our appointments further out, that would make things harder for me because I'd be doing okay one day, but then a week or two later, I'd be feeling really depressed again. So I find that weekly therapy appointments really help me a lot. So I would say talk about it and don't suffer in silence. Because for the longest time, I kept these things to myself. My makes me a little emotional actually. My family knew that something was wrong, like with the eating disorder and everything, but nobody really knew how to address it. And I didn't understand what I was dealing with. I eventually figured out that I had binge eating disorder because I watched videos of other people on YouTube who talked about it, and I read articles and did a lot of research. And I'm not like diagnosing myself. I'm just saying like I definitely had disordered eating. Um, it was kind of similar with depression. Like I kind of knew something was off, but I didn't understand what it was. And I think I may have gone to my primary a couple of times, but I would say the main thing that I've learned is to really advocate for myself strongly. especially in situations where I'm getting pushback. Because now that I think of it, when I was going to my primary with these concerns, instead of just giving me some sertraline or giving me some Cymbalta or whatever antidepressant they put me on, they should have referred me to a psychiatric professional. They should have said, hey, go see this psychiatric nurse practitioner or psychiatrist or whatever and get an evaluation. But nobody did that. And so I'm not saying they didn't do their job, but I felt like there wasn't much guidance. It was kind of like, here, try this medication. Here, try this medication. Try this medication, without me really even understanding what I was going through and not having anyone to guide me on that. Um, so I've learned to advocate for myself in a way that makes it possible for me to achieve my goals. So, you know, when that provider that I had a bad experience with dismissed me and said, "Go to the hospital. We can't help you here. We can't provide the level of care that you need." I filed a complaint against him on their website, and they called me like 2 weeks later, and I explained to them, I was very nice about it, and they offered for me my dog. They offered for me to see a different provider, and I said, "Well, I already have an appointment scheduled with a different practice. I just wanted to let you know what my experience was, and that he needs to be more empathetic and be more understanding of his clients, because it was an appointment where that was very emotional for me. I was upset, I was crying. I was not yelling, I was not cursing, I was not being disrespectful in any way. I was just upset. And I could have just given up, but I had to find a new provider, which I did on my own. And then my EAP coordinator at work was also very helpful. She met with me for like an hour and talked with me about what I was looking for, and she gave me a recommendation as well. So the main thing I would say is being a strong advocate for yourself, having support, and reaching out to that support when you need them, because I've had so many times where I isolated myself and would just be like crying over a bowl of ice cream, like and because food is something that I would turn to when I was feeling really upset, and I didn't understand why, because I had all these things going on that I wasn't dealing with. Um, so advocating for yourself and reaching out to support, um, I think is really important, because I have a lot of people in my life that I know are there for me. I just need to reach out to them and also, you know, reciprocate and be there for them too. Um, it's hard because my family is kind of all across the country. My brother and his family moved to Texas recently. My sister's in Utah. My mom lives locally. But my dad was one of the main supporters that I had. And so when I lost my dad, I lost one of the main people in my support system. And I would definitely say, for anyone who's also grieving, whether it's grieving the loss of a loved one or a divorce or a breakup or whatever it is, who also has a mental health condition, definitely reach out for extra support, whether it's grief counseling, therapy, talking to your doctor. Like, I recently talked to my physician to try to rule out any medical issues, because I dealt with a lot of weight gain and like physical symptoms, which I think are related to the meds and the grief and, everything combined. My situation is kind of complex, especially because of the grief. It makes everything worse, essentially. So that would be my advice, because I just, in my earlier years, I would say my early to mid to late 20s, like my dad passed away when I was 27, and then a month later I was 28. I actually went to the hospital the day after my birthday, so that wasn't very fun. But I spent so much time being frustrated with myself and not understanding why I couldn't feel better and why I felt no hope for the future and why I didn't have goals and why I was isolating myself and why I didn't want to do things that I used to enjoy doing. Like, I stopped beading back in 2013, which I had done a lot when I was a teenager. I used to make medallions and beadwork sets for myself and my family. And I stopped doing that like 10 years ago. And then just recently, for the powwow last weekend, I made a medallion for the founder. Um, and I would also say be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and have, understanding that there are going to be difficulties, but you will get through them. Um, so that's what I would say. Just, getting the support that you need. And a lot of times it's hard to even know what you need, because even now, sometimes people will reach out to me and like, what do you need? Like, let me be there for you. And sometimes I don't feel like talking. Sometimes I don't really know what it is that they can do for me that would help me feel better. So, um, part of it is knowing yourself and, learning what works for you and what helps you in that journey.
Nakia, thank you so much. We're coming up on our last question and the end of our time together, but you've described in detail a really uh, emotional saga of trying to find your diagnosis, trying to find out who you are as a person, and then also dealing with all the complexities of life. You told me that your situation is complex. Life is complex also, especially as we enter our 30s and get all of that, well, middle age stuff going on, I guess I'll say. Thank you again for your honesty and your time. As we close our time together, I want to give you a chance that we as disabled people so rarely get, and that is a chance to like promote yourself, brag about something. If you're open to like networking and building community, where can people find you online? Or if you just want to share like a recent win or something you have like in the works, this is your chance to be your own cheerleader. Step up on your soapbox, Nakia. Let's hear it.
Thank you. So I would say my recent win is that I was the head lady dancer at the Odenong Powwow in Amherst, Massachusetts. It's a smaller powwow, but it was really fun, and I got to do like a jingle dress special, which is the style dance that I do. So I had prizes for the winners, and I did a giveaway where I gave gifts to the drums and the rest of the head staff and the committee. Excuse me, and it was really fun. I spent time with friends, went out to dinner. Um, the foot pain wasn't so good. I was definitely in a lot of discomfort there, but it was a really fun weekend. And I made some handmade gifts. I beaded a medallion, which I hadn't done in 10 years, so that was really exciting. And the friend that I gave it to was very appreciative, so that was great. Everybody was really happy with their gifts and everything, so that was really fun. And I would say just the fact that I work for SUNY is really something that I had never imagined. This is my first job in higher education. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm just very hopeful for the future. I know that, there's some tough days ahead, as always, but, um, just the fact that I'm still dancing and that I started beading again, are all things that connect me with my dad. And it's been really difficult emotionally dancing after his death, um, because he was always present with us, always traveled with us. And, a lot of the songs are very, nostalgic, and the people and the places. And so it's a very positive thing. I think the fact that I'm still able to do it, even though it's so emotionally difficult, has been a very big win for me. So I'm very thankful for that. And I'm also thankful for all of the people that I have in my life, all of the support that I have. Um, because if it weren't for the support that I had, I don't know where I would be today. I'd be definitely in a different position, I think. So, yeah, those are a few wins of mine.
Nakia, thank you so much. I love this outlook that you have, that the future is bright and you're looking forward to it. And life is long. So we'll see where you go next. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I can't wait to see what happens. Nakia, thank you again. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.